Howdy, today we are talking about the general environment. When we talk about the general environment, this includes every industry. It includes everything in the economy. Certain things we are all affected by, and every industry is affected by. There are 7 specific segments of the general environment that we're going to go over today. These segments include demographic, sociocultural, technological, political and legal, economic, global, and physical environments. And we're going to go over each of these individually. With the demographic segment, we are concerned with how the makeup of people can affect your business, your industry, and the broader economy. So we look at things like age structure. If you're in an area with a lot of young people, it might be a great place to have a preschool. If you're in a place with a lot of retired people, other industries such as assisted living or audiology might be really effective. So we consider the age structure of the people and how that could influence your industry. Next, we consider the distribution of people. Are you in a place with a high population density? If so, there are industries that might fit better than if you are in the middle of North Dakota, where maybe ranching is better, where there are fewer people and more available land. With population density, we also have to be concerned with how we are going to get goods and services, well, particularly goods, transported. How are you going to get food or other goods that people want to buy to those areas? Low population density may be a little more difficult in certain things than others, just as high population density might be more difficult for some industries. We'll also consider growth and decline. We've seen some major cities that have had declining populations. Think of Detroit, for example, where there have actually been a lot of homes that have been unoccupied. These homes are unoccupied because people have moved elsewhere. This has a strong effect on the economic or the general business environment, but it's because of the people who are there or who are not there anymore. In contrast, a growing area is going to have a lot of new businesses, a lot of new things going on, and there's a lot more economic opportunity as a result. The next consideration we have is population diversity. Low diversity versus high diversity can influence the types of products that people are actually interested in buying and the types of industries that they are interested in. More diversity usually brings in a lot more variety or attracts a lot more variety of goods and services because of what those people want. So you need to look at the diversity and the makeup, the general makeup of the people in an area so that you can provide them with the products and services that they want. The next segment that we're looking at is the sociocultural segment. Society is changing. We know that. It's always been changing. And along with these changes are the cultural values that form the cornerstone or the foundation of a lot of what we do. An example of this that just shows how these changing values can influence the economy is women in the workforce. When my grandparents were younger, it was very rare for women to work outside of the home. But now that is, if anything, expected. It's very normal. That is a change, and what that's actually done is significantly increased the size of our workforce. What that does is create a lot more opportunity, a lot more growth, and we've been able to see that as a society. There are some other things that we also will see that values change. As an example, there would just be an emphasis on health. As people have learned more and more about how to be healthy, diet and exercise, the values that are accepted have shifted. A specific one there being anti-smoking, to the point that smoking is very often viewed as a negative, where it was once just a normal part of society. And there are these shifts we actually can see have economic impacts. These sociocultural or societal values end up being very prominent in our entertainment, in our marketing, in our messaging, and how we interact with the general public and also with our customers. Now I want to talk about the technological segment. When was the last time you bought a new phone? If it's been more than a couple of months, there's a good chance that your phone is outdated. I know that happened to me last time I bought a phone. I researched everything, chose the right one, and then 2 weeks later, the exact phone I wanted came out with more battery life. And I thought, well, shoot, I wish I'd had that. But I bought what I could when I was making that decision. Our technology is always changing. And with that, we have a lot of things in our businesses that change. And that affects things like communication and record keeping, but also how the work is done. Think, for example, about farming. Often we think about farming as a tractor pulling something and it, grow crops and harvest crops. We don't really think about how advanced that is. John Deere is actually one of the most innovative companies I know. Tractors today can run on GPS and be extremely accurate in where they plant crops. If you can just get an extra 3 inches out of each row over an entire field, you can be a lot more effective and produce a lot more. The technology in farming is extremely advanced, and we see that in pretty much any industry. If you were to look at auto mechanics, for example, the entire car runs on a computer. We also see this in things like finance, where computers really are doing so much of the work. And also, technology has changed the way that we interact with Zoom and with a lot of other things. We can run our businesses differently than we ever have before, and it's because of technology. So in your business, use the right technology. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the most advanced. You need to use what is right for your business. However, I also encourage you to be a technological leader in your industry if that is something that can give you a competitive advantage. The next segment to discuss is political and legal. Who makes the rules that affect your industry and your business? I want to talk about a specific example of a company that you're probably familiar with, Southwest Airlines. So Erd Keller was the former CEO and was the founder of Southwest Airlines. He had the idea sitting at lunch and wrote on a napkin and drew a triangle between San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston and thought, wouldn't it be great to have an airline that could connect those cities that take several hours to drive between? The problem was he didn't have the right to fly because of regulation in the airline industry. So he actually lobbied. He was a lawyer by trade, and he lobbied for years to have the right to fly, but only within the state of Texas. He continued to lobby and continued to push, as did others. And eventually that led to the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. And Southwest from there was finally able to fly across state lines. They could fly to other states, and it really opened up what has become one of the most successful airlines that we have ever seen. But Erd Keller actually had to start by trying to influence the legal system, the regulations over the airline industry, so that he could even operate his business. Now, you might not have the ability to lobby to change laws in your state or nationally, but you do need to understand what influence you may have, or also, if you don't have the influence, what you can do to work within the system. So I want you to consider the regulations that affect your industry and your company. Consider lobbying and what influence you may be able to have. Maybe you don't have the influence as an individual company, but maybe your industry has a lobbying group that can help the government to come up with the right laws for your industry to succeed. Think about tax laws. With tax laws, there are a lot of things to consider. Even the way that you structure your business as an S Corp versus a C Corp versus an LLC can have huge tax consequences. I encourage you to talk to your accountant, have the right accountant and the right people on your team so that you can make the right business decisions. It's also important to note the difference and the compatibility between local and national laws, so that if you're making a decision about where to grow, maybe there's a place where the legal environment or the regulatory environment is more attractive to you and your business and your industry, and you can make business decisions accordingly. To go a little bit deeper into this, I want to talk about I want to show you the days that it takes to start a business on average. This is according to the World Bank in various countries. So in the United States, it takes an average of about 6 days to start a business. Of course, this isn't going to be really complicated businesses, but the United Kingdom is 5 days, Norway 4, Canada and Hong Kong 2 days. Or think about trying to start a business in New Zealand where you can start in 1 day. Compare that now to South Africa, where it's going to take you a month and a half. Or Brazil, nearly 3 months. Or Venezuela, maybe don't even try, because it's going to take you 230 days just to start a business if you're able to get through that political and legal system. I know this is something that in a former job that I had affected our decisions. We were in a retail company and we thought about going into Venezuela. That was a discussion that was had because we were operating in nearby countries and a lot of things were similar. But we were not willing to go in because of the political environment at the time, nor would they still. At that time it was under Hugo Chavez, but now under Maduro, there are still some very similar problems. We would not have been interested in going there because of the political system. Now let's discuss the economic segment of the general environment. When we talk about the general environment, again, that is something that affects all industries. No matter how big your company is or how small your company is, you're going to be affected by the general economic environment. Let's talk about interest rates. When interest rates go up, it's more expensive to borrow money, and so that reduces growth. We actually have seen the Fed change interest rates, and they're continually doing so to try and influence how the economy grows or how fast it grows, or to pull things back if they feel like it's going too quickly and inflation's going up. Is the economy getting stronger or weaker? The stock market is often looked at as an indicator, a barometer, you might say, of the health or the strength of the general economic environment. But it's not the only one. Consider inflation or interest rates. Maybe think about unemployment. What about consumer demand? Is consumer demand getting stronger or weaker? And how does that affect your business? Some businesses actually do better when the economy is weak, such as a discount, like the dollar store is something, or various dollar stores can sometimes do actually better when the economy is weaker because people are looking for lower priced options. Your company or your industry is likely to be affected by the economic environment. Now let's talk about the global segment of the general environment. Again, it doesn't matter what your industry is, you are affected by global economies and international business. Let's talk, for example, about commodities. Commodities are things that are bought and sold, such as wheat or oil, that people can buy and sell, and it doesn't really matter what country you're in, you could buy and sell with almost any other country. Why have gas prices in 2022 gone up so much? Well, a big part of that is because of the reduced supply coming out of Russia, of course, because of a war there, and that has reduced the supply, the global supply of oil, driving prices up. Even if you are not doing business with Russia in any way, you're not trading with Russia, you're still affected because of the global economic or the global business environment. Another thing to consider with the global environment are global niche markets, small markets that can change, where maybe there's an area in the world that would be really interested, even in your product or service that your company provides. So what can you do to reach out to them? Now, I want to share a specific example. I was in Iceland a few years ago and met a mayor of a town of 70 people. Now, he was a really interesting person. He was actually very young. He was probably in his early 30s. And he told us something that I found to be really fascinating. You see, there's a type of fish in Iceland that nobody really wanted to eat there, but it was plentiful. It was a resource that they had available. So they sent chefs out to different places to prepare this fish and see if they could build some demand, some interest in this particular fish. And they found a market in China. They built a market for their fish by introducing it to people. And then they had a valuable export. They were able to catch these fish that were very plentiful and sell them internationally to a specific place that was interested in them. There might be something that you can do by connecting with the right people or the right small segment or large segment somewhere in the world that could give you new economic opportunity. Another thing to consider is the informal economy. The informal economy is anything that doesn't necessarily fit within regulated, taxed, licensed businesses. Now, very often people think of the informal economy as something to do with the black market, and that's not necessarily the case at all. It might not be illegal in any way. If you hire your neighbor as a babysitter, you're probably not reporting that to the government, even though you might pay that person $20 for the evening or $30 or whatever it is that you pay. That's informal economic activity. Maybe trading tomatoes for zucchini that you have grown in your garden for what your neighbor has grown. In certain countries, that informal economic activity can make up the majority of the economic activity that's actually happening. By understanding that, you might find a way to sell your products. And there are actually major companies like Procter & Gamble that sell their products and they end up being distributed through informal or unregistered businesses in developing countries. That informal economic activity or informal economy can be a huge opportunity for growth worldwide, and it can improve the lives of many people as those economies grow. Now let's consider the physical environment. And there are a number of things that we need to pay attention to here. So I was living in Texas when Hurricane Harvey hit. That was in September, I believe, of 2017. There were areas that received more than 4 feet of rain in about 3 days. Now, if you've never seen what that looks like, I want you to pay attention to this photo. There were floods that were so big that it just wiped out entire neighborhoods. I actually went down with some volunteer groups and helped to clean up after that. It was really sad to see, but this had huge economic impacts. For example, a lot of distribution went through Houston, and Houston was damaged to the point that we couldn't actually get gasoline. There were gas stations in my area about an hour and a half away from there that just put up a sign that said, we don't have any gas right now. It took a few days to get that back together, but it was because of a storm. It was something in the physical environment. That also led to huge demand for construction materials. It took a lot of drywall and a lot of lumber to fix the damage that had happened. The physical environment can drive a lot of the business decisions. Maybe there's a particular place you need to be because of something physical. Maybe you need to distribute large commodities or large amounts of commodities, and so it's helpful for you to be near a water port so that it can be shipped efficiently. Think about packaging. Think about a bag of chips that has air in it. If you have to take that bag of chips over I-70 through Colorado, where it's going to go over 10,000 feet, is it going to explode? You have to think about those kinds of things. If you are shipping, packaging, a simple thing could be affected by the height of a mountain over which a road goes. Now think about other resources that we need for economic development that maybe come from mining or from timber harvesting. The physical environment has a lot to do with the resources that we're able to get as an economy for the economic growth and development that we need. We also could look at agriculture, where different climates are best for certain crops that may be grown. I actually really love this photo that shows how the physical environment has influenced some economic decisions. In a place that's flat and windy, it can be very good to grow corn and also harvest wind energy. Energy, of course, is another thing to consider with the physical environment. What are the energy opportunities in an area? And that can influence a lot of different growth or things that you might do. With energy, we need to consider things like oil, certainly a part of the physical environment. We may look at solar or wind energy. There's a lot of solar energy in Arizona and Nevada. It's a good place to be able to harvest that. But then there are limitations on where that can be distributed. All of these things are determined by the physical environment. I want you to consider how the physical environment could influence your industry. And it will influence some industries a lot more or less than others. So here's a question that I want you to consider. I want you to identify the top 3 of these 7 segments of the general environment that could influence your company or your industry. And how can understanding the general environment help you to make decisions in that industry? Thanks for joining today. I hope you liked the video. Have a wonderful day. Take care.